Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of All the Places We Will Go show. Look, we are here every Friday morning at 8 a.m. talking to a very special guest, talking about life's undulations, the ups and downs, the rounds and rounds that lead to eventual success. Now, every now and again, I get the pleasure of meeting somebody truly remarkable. And I know that remarkable is a big word, but it really does sum up Andrew Bloch in so many ways. In fact, I think he's the ideal role model for many of us watching the show here today. He is a remarkably good entrepreneur, having founded one of the most renowned PR agencies in the country, Frank, in 2000. He is a remarkable individual for becoming one of the UK's leading entrepreneurs. He's remarkable for the trust that many of his clients, including Sir Alan Sugar, have in him to deliver in every situation. And he's remarkable for his ability and passion to want to give back through the work that he does at the Prince's Trust. Now, he recently stepped down after 20 years at the helm of Frank to go on to do a variety of different non-executive consultancy roles. And on a personal note, I actually think he wins the world championship in being the quickest man to respond to emails and messages. So there you go, Andrew. That's your claim to fame above everything else. And he's also super generous with his time. And he's kindly going to donate a mentoring session to one lucky person on the show today. Now, to be honest with you, and truth be told, I would love to win that mentoring session myself, but I suspect it's a little bit against the rules. So I'm going to play on the ethical side and cut myself out. But all of you who's been on the show before know what you need to do. So as the show is going on, you need to post your favorite quote of Andrew, post it on LinkedIn, and then Jordan will announce the winner next week. So Andrew, look, it's absolutely fabulous to have you on the show this morning. And I'm going to pass over to Mark for the first question.
Thanks, Richie, and welcome, Andrew. Before I start, let me tell you, that is high praise for none other than Richie Meta to say that somebody else is the fastest at responding in the world to emails, because I had you up on that pedestal, Richie, to be honest. But anyway, fantastic to have you, Andrew. Now let's dive straight in. So ultimately, you kind of left your baby of 20 years in the making at a pretty unprecedented moment in the world. So how does that feel?
I did, yeah. Well, listen, thank you. First of all, what a remarkable introduction. It's like listening about someone else, but thank you. So yeah, I mean, I have left my baby. I haven't completely left my baby. I stepped down and gone into a non-executive role, so I'm still attached to my baby. But for sure, it was, sounds cliched, but really was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. But Frank was 20 years in a great place, with a great team running stuff, doing great work. And something inside me just sort of felt the time was right. It wasn't an overnight decision. It's something that we'd been planning for a couple of years. And we sort of agreed the finer details at the beginning of the year. Little did we know that we were about to be hit by a pandemic. So I found myself sort of stepping back right in the midst of chaos. And I think I had a mixture of sort of, fear, excitement, the unknown. I made a conscious decision. What I would do is just sort of tell people that I was stepping back and then see what would happen. And I hadn't put a plan in place. I'd thought through what I didn't want to do, but I hadn't really considered exactly what I did want to do. And then, this amazing thing happened. The phone just started ringing and I was getting emails and messages, and all these sort of interesting and exciting opportunities started to come my way. And then now I'm, 3.5, 4 months into that journey, and I've just built this great portfolio of interesting things. It wasn't, I don't know what I imagined, really. It's a bit like when 20 years ago, starting Frank, I never really thought forward as to what it could be. I sort of more, I don't know if it's the way my brain works, my mind works, but I kind of thought of what could go wrong and how I'd deal with it if it went wrong. But I didn't really think about what could go right. And I think I've found myself in a sort of similar position as I'm sitting here today. Unfortunately, things so far so good. So.
Andrew, so you're opting now for a pluralist career, a multitude of different things going on. But look, let me take you back 22 years, I guess, from the time when you started and founded Frank.
20 years, yeah, 20 years.
Can you tell us a little bit about that decision, why you did that, some of the motivations behind it?
I mean, I was relatively young in my PR career. I was 5 years in. The MD of the agency that I first started working in, Lynn Frank's PR, sort of came to me. We'd sort of parted ways work-wise, but had remained in touch and said, look, let's set up a PR agency. I said, no, don't think I'm ready. You know, like I could do with a few more years under my belt. He, you know, quite wisely said to me, you know, you'll never feel ready. Let's just do it. And we did it and have never really looked back. And I think, you know, people say to me now, wow, you were so young. It was such a brave thing to do. Da, 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 da. And it wasn't really, because I didn't have a great deal to lose. And as I said previously, you know, the way my mind worked is I just thought through, well, you know, what's the worst that can happen? I'll give it a go. Doesn't work out, I'll sort of go back with cap in hand to my old company or get my CV out there and I'll find another job. And that was my thought process. I never really sort of planned for where it could go. And I look back, sort of sat here today, and you just think, wow, now I'm proud of it. But at the time, it wasn't a big decision. Yes, I had an MD on my business card. It felt pretty cool, but I was MD of no one. You know, it wasn't exactly the greatest role in the world. We had no clients, no business, no staff. You know, it really wasn't a great empire. It was just the beginnings of what was to become something that was much bigger.
So, Andrew, in the few minutes we've had already, what shines through is you do have a sense of adventure and you have an inherent optimism. I'm really interested to know if you can put your finger on where you think those things come from.
I mean, I don't actually class myself as someone who is particularly sort of brave. I think I'm quite risk adverse, very measured in the way I think. But I'm also someone who, I genuinely love what I do, and I have a passion for the work that I'm doing. And I don't think you can sort of artificially create that or force it. It's just something I just enjoy it. I mean, it's just something that I love doing. And with that, I think opportunities tend to come your way. And it's more a case of, I just want to try new things and have a go and see where I can add value and what I'm able to achieve. I don't know whether it's optimism or stupidity, naivety. But, you know, if you don't try something, there is a quote somewhere about, you know, you fail 100% of things you don't attempt, or I paraphrase that, but something along those lines. So, you know, if there is something that I'm interested, an opportunity comes my way, I think it's good. Yes, I'll go through a sort of process of, you know, it's worth doing, can I do it, blah, blah, blah. But I'll give it a go if I think I can add value. I think I've got a confidence in my own ability, and having now done this for a fairly long time, you tend to have a sort of gut instinct that is not always right, but on the whole, you know, if I have a belief in something, you know, it's the same as any campaign we create. I'm sure it's like with you, Mark, you know, when you're putting out a new ad campaign or something, you have the experience to have that gut feel, this is good, this is going to make a difference. You don't know that 100%, but I think experience gives you that optimism. It's not like you're some sort of complete idiot that is just thinks everything's going to be great with no validation or rhyme or reason. I think that's the case.
Andrew, I want to pick up on something you said about, you know, your MD title back in the early days, and the MP, you know, MD of what empire? But particularly speaking, how long do you think it took to scale up Frank to a point where you were kind of going, wow? Because I mean, clearly today it's in a different realm. But I mean, how many years did it take to even get to a point where you kind of felt like this is becoming substantive and scaling, and you felt there was a good business model behind it?
It's a good question. I mean, I've never been one to sort of sit back and reflect and get too overexcited about things. And I think one of the things about running an agency is there is a hell of a lot of ups and downs. I mean, it's a roller coaster, and anyone who tells you differently, quite frankly, is lying. So I've never really got too excited about the highs. And I've always been someone that sort of pushes myself to the next level, the next level, the next level, because you don't want to be complacent. And I think running an agency, the day you stand still is the day you're going backwards. But there were moments, there were moments. On our first birthday, we won the Brill Creamer account, which was a really iconic mass household brand. And we'd beaten a few really big agencies to win that business. And that was a pretty defining moment for us. I thought, wow, we can do this. We can beat the best established agencies out there. And then, over the years, there were the awards you win, which I never, reflect too much on, but they're nice. We won, I think, Marketing Agency of the Year in 2006, I think it was. And that was an award that you didn't enter. It was judged by your peers, by media experts. So that was nice. And then, I think maybe some of the campaigns, you find yourself doing these things. I remember sort of launching Call of Duty, and it was the biggest entertainment launch in history. And we were launching that across, 17 countries simultaneously. And I do remember a moment we were stood outside, it was Battersea Power Station, and we had kind of stormtroopers flying down the sort of chimneys of Battersea and projections in the air, and there was, red carpet. The world's media literally was streaming it. BBC were going live, and I was like, bloody hell, like, we've done this. I mean, it's like you sort of pinch yourself, like, here's me, like the kid that grew up playing computer games with my own kids that are obsessed by computer games, and I'm sat here launching the biggest entertainment launch in history. Like, there are those sort of moments. And now I look back at some of the campaigns, and whenever someone says to me, I remember that, or that's great, or when I do something now and my mum says, oh, I saw that, or have you seen that in the paper, is normally what she says to me. I'm like, yes, I've been working on that stuff. That's cool. And I still get a buzz from that. I think, you've got to love what you do and get a satisfaction out of the results. And, I get that to this day. And actually now I've sort of stepped away from the day-to-day running of Frank, and I'm sort of doing some of my own stuff. I'm almost getting that thrill all over again, because I guess I proved to myself I can still do the actual work as well as sort of direct other people to do the work, which is, a nice feeling. I love the trade and the craft of what we do, and the coming up with the ideas and then seeing that through to fruition and reality.
So I'd not made the link before, but I do now actually hold you partially responsible for my son's gaming. I don't know if I call it a problem or whatever, but so thanks. But you described a roller coaster, and then you talked a lot about some of the highlights and the awards and so on. Obviously, on a roller coaster, there's the downs as well. So what have been some of the trickier spots, and how have you found the resolve to navigate through them? I
mean, there's the day-to-day trickiness, and when you work in a client business, clients are hard work, I'm afraid to say, sometimes. And you have the disappointed clients, you have the campaigns that didn't go as well as you want, you have the pitch losses, which, is always hard when you put a lot of time and energy into something. But you kind of ride through those, because you know that will go and something good will come. I think probably one of the hardest periods at Frank was we had, I think, 11 or 12 years of constant growth year on year, really fast and impressive growth, and almost, I guess, took it for granted in a way that you were just going to keep on growing. And then it started to sort of slow down and flatten, sort of year 13, year 14. I mean, fortunately, we didn't ever go into a sort of massive roller coaster style dip, but that growth slowed and steadied, and that was tough. You're like, shit, we don't grow every year by magic, and we, I don't know, without being too dramatic about it, dug deep and thought, okay, well, I don't want to be in an agency that's not growing. It's boring. It's like you can't hire people, you can't get the best people, you can't win the best clients. So we really, I wouldn't call it any sort of pivot. I think that's probably a bit too dramatic a term, but it forced us to realize, what makes an agency great. And I think the hardest thing about running an agency, whether it's PR, ad, media, whatever, is being relevant and doing great work. And I think, if I reflect back on that sort of period where we flattened, the work wasn't as good as it once was. It wasn't terrible. I would never sort of produce terrible work, but what we weren't at our best. And we really just sort of, I guess, got together and like, come on guys, let's sort this out. And we really focused on, let's make our campaigns as brilliant as they can be. Let's just dig that bit harder when we're pitching for a client and win the best clients. And we came out of it. But it was, it was a bit of a wake up call. And, you do see fantastic agencies rise and fall. And it's just sort of the nature of, I think, the marketing services world, where people can get a little bit starstruck by the new cool startups. And when you're a small agency and you're starting, you've got that energy, that buzz, you're the cool kid on the block. The hardest thing about scaling up and growing is keeping all the things that made you brilliant when you started, that sort of freshness, the coolness, the excitement, and not falling into the trap of, just because you're big, behaving like you're big. And we started to think of Frank as a kind of, I don't know, like almost a small agency that just happened to get big, but trying to keep that boutique, not just feeling to the outside world, but total behavior in terms of how we acted, not becoming too corporate, not having too many internal meetings and processes and structures. You want to keep that entrepreneurial flair and vibe to the agency. And I think that's what sort of pulled us out of it. We sort of got a bit too grown up and sensible. And, that's not why people hired us. It's not why people liked us. And then once we realized that and started sort of, I guess, going back to being small, I looked a lot. There's lots of great brands out there, but one of the brands that I've always admired is Innocent, and they talk about being professionally unprofessional, and I thought a lot about that, and I love that. And the way that I've interpreted that is, you have to sort of always feel fluid, spur of the moment. These are just ideas that you've almost sort of had in the shower, phoned your agency, got out within 20 minutes of thinking of it. But actually, they're completely thought through, well-formed, brilliant marketing campaigns. And we tried with Frank, to make our approach to a lot of the campaigns we were doing and the way we sort of package the agency to have that professionally unprofessional feel, where people just look at it and they think, I guess, wish I'd thought of that, is the reaction you want from other agencies and clients and marketers. And there's a real skill to that. You can't be sort of unprofessionally unprofessional. You have to, especially when you're doing campaigns that are quite edgy or have an element of risk or controversy to them, you always have to think through the downsides, what could go wrong, what's the risk, and plan for that carefully, and then you just go for it. And you've always got to be brave in the way you do stuff. And I think that applies both to clients, but also to agencies and how they market themselves and build themselves as brands in their own right.
Andrew, I love the the analogy around, I wish I'd thought of that, because I think that's a great sort of benchmark to have when considering launching campaigns. And your words around taking those risks and being brave, surely are the cornerstone of both client and agency life, in our marketing world. And that really resonates with me. I have to ask though, you've literally had some of the most iconic, both corporate clients and personal branded clients as well. I mean, Sir Alan Sugar is a great example of that. Can you give us some insight? Well, one, actually, what is it like to work with him? Because that's brilliant, and thinking about that. But then two, I mean, how do you come at new client development? I mean, how were you able to build this empire of great clients? Is there any tips and guidance you could share with us?
That's a great question. I think, I don't know. In some ways, the new business strategy of Frank was born out of the fear of having to pick up the phone and cold call and sort of sell yourself. And I sort of realised, not just me, but others within the agency, that obviously the best way to win clients is for them to see what you're doing. And this will sound super simplistic, but it's true. If you do great work, everything follows from that. You do great work, people see it, clients see it, they want to work with you. People want to work with you because they want to be doing that sort of work, and you attract the best people. And so really what drove the new business and won the clients and continues to win the clients is doing good work. And I think the day you stop doing great work is the day you stop becoming a great agency. And, an agency, there is no shortage of agencies in this world. There's a lot of them. I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say there's probably an oversupply of agencies. So the key is, why are you different to anyone else? What is your point of difference, and why would a client want to work with you? And I believe you have to stand for something. That point of difference has to be true. You can't kind of make it up. And you have to stick by that. You shouldn't be all things to all people. And with Frank, we've always tried to maintain a strong brand culture. We've always positioned ourselves, well, we just are, a creative agency. And then we really focused around the ethos of talkability and the principle that if you can get other people talking about your campaigns, that is your best form of marketing. And worked very, very hard to not just do PR or comms campaigns for the sake of it. And, there is a lot of communication out there that is just noise. And, especially in today's digital age, getting an audience isn't difficult. You can reach people in seconds. You can hit them by, 1,000 different forms of marketing, media, advertising, whatever you want to do. The hard bit is the fight for attention and getting people to sit up and take notice and engage. So we always tried to push clients to sort of think about campaigns that are going to make a difference and that are going to resonate, and to try and, I don't know, maybe disrupt conventions a little bit. And that's what we've always fought hard to stand for. I think it's very easy to fall into a trap when you run an agency of just taking a brief, taking it literally, giving a client what they want. And a great agency will try and challenge the client. And, if they don't believe that is the right solution, so that they can produce the right work. And I think, actually a great agency needs great clients. And you have to be prepared to walk away from opportunities that don't feel right, or you don't think are going to deliver the results, which I think we've done naturally over the years. I think by having a strong brand, you tend to attract clients that think like you and very cheesy, but sort of work as partners together with you, as opposed to treating you like a supplier. And you naturally deflect the ones that aren't going to allow you to do the best work and be true to yourselves.
So, Andrew, you're saying that Sir Alan Sugar is just like you, or you're just like him? Is that?
I don't know which of us would be more horrified to hear me agree to that. I mean, we're similar in lots of ways. I mean, funnily enough, what you said to me right at the beginning about sort of being quick to reply to emails and response, I think I've learned that from him. I mean, potentially it's sort of one of my natural traits anyway, but, you know, he's someone that is super busy, runs, you know, dozens of businesses, but also kind of has got to a stage in life where he can enjoy life and sit on a yacht, fly his own planes, etc. But I know if I send him an email, WhatsApp, whatever it might be, he will respond to me. I mean, normally immediately, but I worry when I haven't had a reply within an hour or so. And efficiency is super important to him. You know, he does not want someone that he has to chase, that he has to wait for. And I've got used to that over time, but I think that's sort of how I am. You know, for me, the real basics of client servicing is being responsive and getting back and managing expectations and not allowing people to become frustrated or to worry, like, is something in hand, you know, and his, you know, that I'm very much like that. It's just part of my makeup, but I know him and he wouldn't tolerate someone that kind of doesn't get back quickly or isn't on top of the detail or doesn't remember something. But, you know, we're similar in that respect. We're different in lots of other respects, but when you've worked with someone for a long period of time, and I've worked with them for nearly 20 years, you know, you just know a client inside out and how to keep them happy, basically. And that's the basics of client servicing. He's no different to any other client in that respect.
Yeah, we can all learn a bit from that in terms of immediacy. It shows that you care as much as anything. You talked a little bit about there's now hundreds of ways to hit consumers, but it's about getting the cut through. You know, you and I predate the world of social media. So how do you sum up in your mind how the landscape has changed with the advent of digitization and social media? What's been the impact for the way you run an agency and the way you think about the world?
Yeah, I mean, the world I started in, like you, was, you know, makes me feel prehistoric. But, you know, just to put it into context, you know, when I started out in PR, the internet wasn't really there. It took, I think when I was about a year into the working life, we got one email address for the entire company. You know, any sort of photography or was biked out on transparencies by couriers. You had to fax press releases to news desks. And then, you know, the world has transformed since then. And obviously the advent of the internet, social media, the principles of what we do are absolutely no different. For me, the digital sort of revolution has made it more exciting. You know, the immediacy of the thing I always loved about PR on day one was the fact, you know, you could have a campaign, an idea, and the next day, you know, it would be in the newspapers or on the news. And I was always that kind of loser that I couldn't wait for the next morning. I'd be at King's Cross when the papers would come out at 11 at night, so I could see it sort of a few hours earlier. And now that immediacy is, you know, you can have a campaign and it's out in seconds, and that's really powerful and really exciting. And I look back at some of the early Frank campaigns and I think, oh, I wish Twitter was invented, you know, when we did that campaign, because the spread of it would have just been immense, especially some of that gaming stuff. But some of our more sort of controversial or tongue-in-cheek or provocative campaigns would have been just unbelievable in the social media era. But I do think it's also, in some ways, I think because there are channels there and brands can own their own channels, I don't know about laziness, but it's sort of, I always think, you know, just because a digital channel is there and you have the ability to post, to tweet, doesn't mean you have to do it. And you certainly shouldn't be doing it for the sake of it and any old crap, you know. So I don't know whether it sort of made marketers lazier. You know, you can buy eyeballs very, very easily. If you wanted to reach 1 million people by tomorrow, of course you can do that. But I hate the fact that can potentially lead to a sort of laziness of creativity. And to me, the sort of best campaigns are truly integrated and use a sort of combination of earned and paid and the various different channels. And actually what the sort of storytelling bit of it does is just snowball that effect and build the return on investment and make stuff work harder. And certainly I'm not like an advocate of not using paid channels, because actually the greatest campaigns are where everything sort of works together to just make the message travel further, work harder, build more awareness. So, you know, look, I think when you work in the industry that we work in, you have to have an appetite for understanding new technology, to learning it. And I learn all the time, you know, it's constantly being schooled about, you know, whether it's programmatic advertising or whatever it might be, all these things that, you know, for me were just sort of terms that I didn't really comprehend a few years ago, or maybe they're things that didn't even exist a few years ago. You have to understand the latest technology, the latest ways you can do things. And I think it inspires creativity, because you can now do different stuff, and, you know, new channels emerging all the time, new techniques, new disciplines. And I love working with sort of the data geeks and the number people, and then sort of combining that sort of art and science, I guess it is, to really create the magic of a brilliant campaign.
Andrew, I think you know, that's a great summary of some of the key future trends that are taking place as well. Just a quick reminder, everyone, do post your favorite quote of Andrew onto LinkedIn for a chance to get a mentoring session with him. And it's a bit of a once in a lifetime opportunity, to be honest with you. And I'm probably going to do one myself, but nevertheless, I've got a great question from Chirag, who works at Mars. So Andrew, what are the principles checklists to achieve a great PR campaign?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if there's a checklist. I think for me, you should never be doing PR for the sake of doing PR. It's always got to link back to your business objectives. So whether that is building awareness, changing perceptions, selling more product, that's what it has to come back to. And then you sort of look at that objective and work towards how you're going to achieve that. And your checklist really should be, you know, is this campaign going to lead to this? And then, you know, on top of that, it's not just, is it going to achieve, you know, the business objectives, but is it going to make a difference to maybe some of the sort of softer measures? Is it going to make people smile? Is it going to make people feel warmer about my brand? Is it going to increase our share of voice against competitors? Is it going to make a true difference? Is it going to have an impact? So I think, you know, every checklist is different in terms of the principles. I mean, maybe it's about, is this a campaign we're proud to put our name to, you know, or is it just a piece of shitty work that isn't going to make a difference and not make, you know, just, you never want to waste the client's money. You always want to do something that's going to make them happy, make them proud, make a difference to their business. And ultimately, you know, going back to what you were saying about how do you build an agency? Well, you build the agency by doing the great work, but then, you know, that great work leads to organic growth, because you work within the business and then they give you more briefs, they open it up to different brands, and then those people that work within that organization inevitably move on to different organizations. So I always like to think, you know, is this piece of work going to get me hired again? Is it going to give us our next job? And the you know, most agencies have a mix of sort of project and retained clients. And as we're sort of, you know, doing more and more projects for clients, it's kind of hard work. It's fun, but, you know, you put all this energy in and then it stops. You want to know that that campaign's going to lead to the next project, or, you know, the client thinks you're so indispensable that they want you on retainer 24/7 because they can't do without you. So those are some of the things that go through my head. But ultimately, is this campaign going to achieve the objectives? And sometimes you have to help a client define what those objectives are, because they don't necessarily, or challenge those objectives. But the best campaigns, it's a good question. So it's just thinking through. But if you can demonstrate return on investment, ultimately that's what you have to be trying to do, especially in a world of data and numbers where you have, performance marketing agencies that can be very analytical in terms of spend this, get this. PR especially needs to step up and show we're not just that sort of fluffy, nice feeling bit that if it makes a difference, great. If it doesn't, oh well, it's only like 5% of our marketing pot. Bullshit. Like PR can measure, it can make the difference, and it can make an exponential difference to what a numbers agency can do. But you have to be able to prove that, and your checklist needs to define how you're going to do that.
I agree with that thought that PR as a medium has the potential to hit the jackpot in a way that others a bit more mechanistic and can't. Now, Andrew, you don't get to achieve everything you've achieved without being pretty good at networking. Sometimes networking is seen as something quite intimidating or a bit of a dirty word, but it's important, right? So what will be your advice to everyone watching in terms of how to be an effective networker?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm a good and a terrible networker. So you won't find me at a sort of cheese and wine party with a name badge saying, "Hi, I'm Andrew." Like, no, thank you. But I think I network almost by accident. In the, I don't go out my way to meet people, but I'll give time to everyone, and if I can, and by sort of, I guess, doing things like this, and there will be people that will look at this and think, "What a dick! I never want to work with him." And there might be people that think, he could maybe help me. That's my type of networking. And if people think I'm a dick, sorry. And if they think they'd like to work with me, great. Send me an email. Drop me a message on LinkedIn. That's how to network. And I think I've always believed that you should give time to people if you can. And if people ask you for advice or help or want a contact, it doesn't take a great deal of your time to do it. Of course, it's easier just to say no or ignore them, but you never know what kind of comes back. I don't want to come across as some sort of hippie, but I do believe in karma. And if you put out the right energy and you help people and you do favors for people and you don't expect anything in return, which I never would, that it does sort of come back to reward you. And of course, the best way to network is just by showcasing what you're up to and what you're doing. It's sort of, I don't know if that is networking or if that is marketing, but I've always found the most effective form of networking for me is just sharing campaigns that either I've done personally or Frank have done, or actually sharing other people's work can be a good form of, I think if you're generous in your praise with others, especially when it's genuine, which it always would be with me, I'd never sort of say something good if I didn't think it was. It kind of, it all comes around, and we work in a small industry, and I think like-minded people tend to just gravitate towards similar people, and that's been my sort of style of networking over the years. It's not a typical form of networking. I hate that sort of networking clubs or forced sort of friendships. It's just not my type of thing, but I do it in my own way, which I think is really just intuitive and not planned and not contrived. It's just how I operate as a person, and it's kind of worked for me in that it's enabled me to build connections with people that are similar to me. The cheese and wine crowd will always sort of gravitate towards one another, and that's fine. I'm not knocking it. It's very valid. It's just not for me personally. And people who are more like me that, I don't know, hide behind Twitter or LinkedIn or find each other that way. So it's just how it's worked.
Andrew, it's to be honest, it's what you've said has come across in spades to me over the last couple of weeks, getting to know you better, and I can totally resonate with with the sentiment there. And I love the thought when you said, is it networking or is it marketing? And I kind of think what a lovely sort of blurring of the lines between those two things that I hadn't given much thought to before. So it's a great insight there. I know we're running out of time. I just want to take one question from Raju. So he asks, today, a troll or a negative post can potentially damage a brand. Thus, ORM, not quite sure what ORM is, maybe you do, plays a key role. How does one ring fence a brand from a PR perspective?
What social media has done is it's given brands and consumers the opportunity to interact directly. And sure, one tweet can damage a brand, but one tweet can also make a brand. And I think, social media has opened up a real opportunity for PR agencies, because the way that a PR person thinks is intuitively storytelling and building connections and earning respect. And in my opinion, brands shouldn't shy away from social media for fear of the troll. And, a lot of it is pretty meaningless. Yes, there are examples of brands that have had big reputational damage, via stupidity or poorly thought through messaging. But at the same time, there's, hundreds of thousands of brands that have built themselves and built their businesses through social media. And to me, the ability to be able to interact directly with consumers is a really, really powerful thing. And sometimes you sit as an agency and you've created these great campaigns, built this brand warmth, made people smile, made people think favorably about your brand. And then, as a consumer, I'm sat there, phoning my mobile service operator or my utilities company or my insurance company. And the experience I get is so different on the phone or on social media when I'm not responded to or whatever it might be. And you think, such a shame, you're putting all these millions into marketing and then you're letting yourself down in terms of your consumer interaction. And actually the two things can work together. But there is a role for PR agencies to be the guardians of that interaction and to use it. There's lots of examples of brands that do it extremely, extremely well. And I think the best brands are wising up to the power of that interaction and how to use social media in a clever way and sure, there's risks, but there's risks with every marketing campaign you do. And like any other form of marketing, you have to think through the pitfalls of what you're doing, the downsides of what could go wrong and how you would mitigate for it in that instance. And look, we're in a society of snowflakes where you sometimes can't do right for doing wrong or can't do wrong for doing right, whatever way you want to look at it. But you shouldn't be paralyzed by fear. Sometimes you need to have an element of bravery, otherwise you just get paralyzed and frozen and don't do anything, and doing nothing is the worst thing you can do as a brand. Don't know if that answers that or not, but hopefully.
Mark, you're on mute.
Well, I was going to say what a great way to end, actually. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but a fantastic note to end on in terms of that element of bravery. So, Andrew, I'd like to thank you for your insights around PR and marketing and brands and media, of course, but also the extra layers that I think you brought with some wonderful insights. And if I just play back my takeaways, very much that spirit of have a go, which is where we started and ended the conversation, an element of bravery. A bit wowed at your level of immediacy, but we can also take something from that. I love when you said, give time where you can, give time if you can, and don't expect anything in turn. And I think that reflects your generosity. But what really shines through is your authenticity. And I can say categorically, you are not part of the cheese and wine crowd, which is a good thing. And for that, I forgive you for what you've done to make Call of Duty such a big thing, even though my son is probably taking it a bit too far. But thank you for your time, Andrew. It's been wonderful to have you on. And I know I speak on behalf of everyone to say thank you for your wisdom and insights. I'll let Andrew have the last sort of sign off, but just to flag for next week, we've got another fabulous guest, Rod Bristow, who's president of the Pearson in the UK and overseeing their digital learning transformation. And he'll be taking us through his journey, how he started at Pearson and made his way all the way up through to the exec leadership board. So another classic coming next week. But in lieu of that, thank you again, Andrew.
Thank you very much for having me on. I enjoyed it, and I hope others did too. Go back to bed now.
Exactly. Well, good weekends all, and see you next week.